Hello and welcome to The Big Debate, coming to you live on SABC2 and SABC News Channel 404 and SAFM. We're also live on SABC News YouTube. I'm Ridi Klabi. Now, how can one get away with corruption? It helps if you know the president or his son to pay bribes for tenders. Alternatively, you might try taking over a bank and persuading municipal mayors from your party to deposit billions for you to grab. If relatives of opposition politicians also benefit, it will help throw investigators off the scent. Now, as a private sector thief, you can cook your books to push up your share price. Just be sure to tip off your associates to sell their shares just before you are caught. Even easier, simply set up your head office in a tax haven and stash your cash there so SARS can't find it. If you can get the Public Investment Corporation, which manages the pensions of public servants, to invest in your scheme, your potential loot goes from billions to trillions. Have a few sleeping pills on hand so you don't have to lie awake at night thinking of the people, nurses, teachers, pensioners whose futures you have stolen. Sounds far-fetched? In fact, it describes the evidence currently on the table of corruption and corporate malfeasance in Busasa, VBS, Steinhoff, many large banks, cell phone giants like MTN, and more. Now, is corruption inevitable? Can we imagine a South Africa in which clean business is the norm? With me to discuss this are Andries Nel, Deputy Minister of Cooperative Governance, Martin Kingston, Vice President of Business Unity South Africa, and he's also Executive Chairman of Rothschild's Bank in South Africa, Bantu Holomisa, President of the United Democratic Movement, Kevin Malunga, the Deputy Public Protector, investigative journalists Paula van Wyk and Micah Reddy. We also have Themba Godi, Chair of the Public Accounts Committee in Parliament and President of the African People's Convention, and activist and author Dale McKinley. And of course, in our audience, we have people who lost money in VBS. We have public service workers, including nurses and teachers. We have community leaders and residents from Limpopo, Gauteng, and across South Africa. Welcome to you all. Thank you. Now, you at home can have your say. How are we doing in our fight against corruption? We have 15,000 votes already, and 89% of you say we are failing. That's a pretty large majority. Now, send your comments and vote by dialing our free vote line. But before we start our debate, take a look at this.
Venda in Limpopo. People survived hard times during apartheid by saving in stokvels. This is the origin of Venda Building Society, or VBS.
Ndi mafarara fanwele ndi mkoa mawafano chamchezi vuraya ibanga 2000.
In 2017, when Fanuel went to withdraw funds for a burial, he got a shock.
Zvino rikivoya vari kai 14,000 ni funori ni wane 1,000.
Musiri kodi bangai rabo dosokoto wana vutanzi ha uri chelede VBS aicha wanara.
Chilidzi Mulawusi is the civic chairperson.
Atina pulufelo uri chelede asiru they want.
Recent VBS saga that has dominated our headlines in recent times can be encapsulated in what is happening now just behind me, long queues.
Thousands of pensioners rushed to VBS to try in vain to access their savings. In 2018, the bank collapsed. Since 2014, VBS managers stole municipal service delivery funds deposited in the bank by ANC mayors, making donations to ANC and others. Pensioners and residents lost 2 billion rands. West Rand Municipality alone lost 77 million rand and now struggles to pay workers.
That all those who are responsible for facilitating this fraud and this corruption, and all those who have benefited from it, must be held accountable.
And what has happened in South Africa is that, under Zuma's administration, that fear of punishment disappeared, because all the institutions that can hold people to account have been dismantled, intentionally so.
Magda Vieshka is CEO of Signia Asset Management and one of South Africa's richest women. She says the fight against corruption is about a moral compass.
There were numerous instances where I could have, with 2 signatures, moved huge amounts of money, and we really are talking about huge amounts of money, offshore into offshore bank accounts, gotten onto the plane to Brazil, and you would never have heard of me, and I could have lived and retired in comfort.
This is a very limited way of understanding what corruption and theft is, right?
Activist Kokezo Mowete believes that large-scale tax avoidance, even when legal, can also be thought of as corruption.
If we are talking about corruption, if we are talking about theft, there are many ways, sometimes much more sophisticated, in which the rich do steal. We have examples of the way that tax regimes are undermined by the very wealthy.
Tech giants like Google and Facebook angered many in Europe for dodging tax. Apple was fined. South African firms invest in those companies. When Cyril Ramaphosa chaired MTN, the company illicitly transferred billions to Mauritius. Former President Mbeki joined a UN campaign to stem R1 trillion lost from Africa each year in illicit flows.
It might be legal, but if it's immoral, we must indeed achieve the objective of stopping the bleeding.
It's not a victimless crime. It directly impacts our ability to provide services, key services such as hospitals.
At Steinhoff, 100 billion was wiped out through accounting fraud. In all these cases, the losers include public servants whose pension funds were invested through the Public Investment Corporation. Back in Venda, Fanwell and Chilidzi received about half of their money back.
Vatu vane vakotioritusa navo vana milandu. Ndiri muthu ane nikoshavela ka muthu ane nikori antuse ka mulandu wanu. Naene akadiva na mulandu wawe.
Andries, now let's start with you. Okay, we know that you got rid of 14 mayors who were implicated in VBS. I would argue that's a very easy target. Furthermore, that retail depositors did get their money when Treasury issued a guarantee to the Reserve Bank to pay the depositors, right? Nedbank took over that debt. There are so many layers and so many questions. Let's start with this one. You as the ANC are implicated, 2 million rand from VBS. Not only that, Vele busing in people using money that they got from VBS to the Nasrec conference. How can we believe that you are truly anti-corruption when you are implicated in this way? It's laughable.
No. I think let us start off by stating categorically, unambiguously, that the ANC is opposed to corruption and malfeasance in any form that it takes. We are the first to admit that there are members, that there are structures who have done wrong, who have committed crimes, who have behaved unethically, and we are committed to cleaning up that mess and to cleaning up that rot. You've alluded to the fact that 14 mayors have been removed, municipal managers have been removed, chief financial officers have been removed. That is not the end. That is the start of a process of investigating those crimes, of making sure that anyone who is implicated is brought
not the
to
ministers,
book.
though, not the senior members of the NEC. You go for the middle people. When are we seeing people being fired, not making it onto your parliamentary list, precisely because the allegations against them are of a serious nature?
I think let us look at the history of the past 25 years of our country. Our history has proven that no one is above the law. We've had presidents, deputy presidents, ministers, MECs, chief whips, all being charged.
Where? You don't fire them, they don't step down. Where? Which country are you talking about? Not the one I live in.
But people have been arrested, they've been
You protect
put on
them.
trial,
You are hauled to court
and they've
before
been
you do
sentenced.
the right thing.
Sorry?
You are hauled to court before you do the right thing. Zondo Commission, arms deal inquiry, all of that.
But really, we live in a constitutional democracy that sets out, firstly, values of openness, transparency, and accountability. It sets heavy consequences for corruption, but it also sets out a rule of law and the rights of individuals to be assumed innocent until they're proven otherwise.
Polly, I mean, you've been investigating all of this from SARS and VBS and so on. We hear the ruling party and opposition party saying there's no evidence, bring evidence before us. Firstly, is there no evidence, and do you buy this, that there is that strident and firm stance against corruption from our ruling party and our government?
So let's look at what constitutes evidence. Evidence would be, in this case, what the curator seized from VBS Bank when the bank was put under curatorship. We're talking about the seizing of cell phones, laptops, the bank system. So we have bank statements, we have private chats, and we have private emails. Now, all of that has been seized, and that is the information that the Hawks and the National Prosecuting Authority are supposed to investigate and then prosecute successfully. That is also the evidence that I am basing my investigations on. So that is the evidence that we're talking about. The problem then with the ANC saying that there's repercussions is that it's extremely slow. So I can understand then that people have a certain anger against the ANC because we don't really see this. Where is Mr. Danny Msiza's trouble? Where is Mr. Kabelo Matsepe? Where's the municipality? Where are these municipality managers? They may be fired or they may be extracted from their jobs. What are they doing now? Are they, going to India to be in another job? Are they being redeployed? What is happening?
You've been very vocal on a whole lot of scandals in the history of our country, from the IEC, but now recently the PIC. You are delighted that the president has extended the term of the PIC, and you've been calling for more investigators and more skills to be invested in the PIC. So things are happening. You must be happy. You must be satisfied.
So far, I'm satisfied. However, I feel that the current Commission of Inquiry needs to be beefed up with the expert people. Forensic auditing, the FICA processes must kick off, so that you can follow the paper trail and bank statements and bank accounts. Then at the end of the day, this commission will come up with sound findings so that a new government can say never again shall we misuse the monies of the workers.
Micah, what do you say about this? I mean, are you satisfied that there's enough seriousness, corruption is taken seriously in the way that we've described, that our processes are in place? I mean, Mr. Holomisa has just spoken about the FICA Act, Financial Intelligence Centres Act. The fact of the matter is that when the Hawks appeared in Parliament, they were not sure what the Act actually says. So how on earth are they going to investigate and hold people to account when they don't know what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, our criminal justice system is broken. I think there's no doubt about that.
Who broke it?
It started before Zuma's. State capture didn't start with Zuma. The state was being used to fight political battles when Mbeki was president. But we can't be a country that's run by commissions. And we're in very, very deep trouble now. I don't think that any amount of tumaminering and finger wagging and sweeping out the bad guys is going to fix this. This is about deep structural issues. It's not about good and bad. It's not about...
Martin Kingston, let me bring you in here. You mentioned Micah tumaminering. You are a big optimist. In fact, you've just stepped down as CEO of Rothschild South Africa. You're staying on as executive chairman. But not only that, you've been advising SAA on the board. You've been commenting to NERSA about ESCOM and so on. And you've also said that you'd like more synergy between the public and the private sector. What is the basis of your optimism when every single day we are battered with scandal after scandal from the Zondo Commission, from the PIC and so on?
I think really I should make 2 points first. That is that the private sector is as culpable as the public sector. We need to know that, we need to acknowledge it, and we need to hold all parties to account. And I think one of the frustrations that we all feel is that the holding to account is not evident, it's not visible, and it's not quick enough. And people's patience is running very thin. The second is that we need a capable and competent state. What we've seen progressively, certainly over the last 10 years, has been a fundamental erosion of capabilities and capacity, particularly but not only in the public sector. And we think that the private sector has its role to play. We think it's got surplus resources that can be made available to work hand in glove with other social partners, not, I have to say, only government, but also community, also faith-based organizations, also organized labor. If we don't put our collective shoulders to the wheel, I have to say that we're going to see very little progress, and we're going to, as I said, undermine our prospects to address the issues.
That all sounds reasonable, and I'm glad you went there. You said the private sector is just as culpable. But I have to ask you this. Rothschild, the guardian of the French chapter of the bank, when he died, it was found that he had a network of offshore accounts. And it was also opaque that you couldn't see his hand in it. Rothschild itself, in Malaysia, the 1MDB corruption scandal. What else? The US has just fined Rothschild for enabling some of the investors to hide their money offshore. So we say the private sector is just as culpable, but we are associated with it and we don't speak out at the right time. How do you reconcile all of that?
Well, first of all, I need to distinguish between many members of the Rothschild family, because the bank or the institution that I work for has nothing to do with MDB, by the way. There is another Rothschild involved. In fact, there's a Rothschild on the board of SAA, Jeff Rothschild. He has nothing to do with Rothschild. We need to be
Rothschild
careful.
Bank, the Swiss
well,
bank,
we need to be
filed
careful.
in the US.
The
That's
Swiss
the
bank has nothing to do with the Rothschild that I represent. But the truth of the matter is that these issues go undetected, and it is easy, I have to say, particularly for sophisticated institutions, to hide criminal activity from the public eye, and not just from the public eye. I hope you're going to talk about the lack of governance and judgment that is demonstrated in boardrooms by regulators and those who actually should have access to information to enable them to express opinions and form views and detect where criminal acts are taking place.
Kevin, I have to bring you in here. You are the deputy public protector. And it seems as if to act for the ordinary citizen, you've got to bring some very powerful people down. Let's be honest, prominent people, the ANC notably, their name all over PIC, Zondo Commission, the Busasa sagas. Do you have the stomach for this?
Absolutely, really. There's the past few years have been very colorful and interesting, and I think starting with, for example, the Ngandla debacle and state capture and so forth, this all got into the public eye and public space. But what I get a sense of really is the fact that the big problem is the absence of consequences. In the sense that people may be accused of things. Sometimes the public protector or the Hawks and other entities, Special Investigation Unit, for example, has a report from 2008 sitting in a drawer.
But who's supposed to create those consequences?
Yes.
I mean, we know we can say people must go vote on May 8th.
It's the very government
that who's supposed to make
this
that happen?
government that Mr. Nell is
but
part
if they are
of,
the
that we
violators
investigate.
of the rules, what do we do?
So they have to be pushed. That's one of the roles, one of our roles, in the sense that I think we get a sense that there hasn't been a sense of ownership, enough ownership of the problem, in the sense that consequences, asset forfeiture, and so forth.
Dale, what do you think? You write about this, and you talked about what? The corporatization of the liberation. What do you make of all of this?
Well, I think, first of all, we have fundamentally a structural problem. It started pre-94, and it started with the agreements that led to the post-democratic South Africa. Let's be honest. The agreement was, you get political power, you leave the economy alone, essentially. And when you've left the economy alone, you leave all of the corrupt intact. We forget that from the apartheid to post-apartheid, the synergies and continuities are there. They're constantly through. So what we have is we have a system that is fundamentally compromised, irrespective of the fact that there's good people in the ANC or there's good people in other parties. The system itself is fundamentally there, and it protects private capital, and it protects those in the government that work with private capital to corrupt our system. And we have to, so it's impunity. We see it in South Africa, we see it in the United States, we see it in Europe, we see it all across the world. Impunity equals power. The only answer to that impunity is people's power. That is the only problem.
Hold that thought. We'll talk about people's power in just a moment. President Cyril Ramaphosa has replaced the heads of several institutions where corruption was rife, from SARS to the NPA. But we've seen few criminal prosecutions and very little money recovered. After the break, we ask, can we get the money back? Don't go away. Welcome back to the big debate on corruption on SABC2, SABC News Channel 404 and SAFM. Earlier in our insert, we heard about some people from Limpopo who lost money in the Great Bank Heist. That's a term given to the theft of money from VBS. Chilitsi Mulausi is from Venda, and he's from a community that lost almost half its savings in the VBS scam. Let's talk to him. Chilitsi, thank you so much for coming. Are here to tell us how you've been affected by the scam. How has your life changed?
Oh, you know...
Put the microphone in front of you.
Thank you very much. You know, I feel so bad and very bad when the rich people take money for the poor and use it. After that, we keep only print out from the bank. You know, we had almost around plus minus 170. It's not much money, but that money help us a lot.
170,000 rand, right?
And then they give us only 100,000, and then we're still waiting for another money. That's why I said, when are we going to get our money? Who's gonna give us our money? Because when we go there, they say they don't have money. We struggle too much to get it, but it was so difficult.
How do you feel about the people who did this? These were people that you knew, that you trusted. How do you feel?
You know, I feel very bad, especially when we put, you know, bank, we trust bank first. And then when we put our money to the bank, we feel that our money is safe. And then we carry slip, or print out a slip, all right? And then after that, because we trust bank, somebody follow under the ground and take money from the bank. We still keeping our slip with amount, you know that.
Okay.
Then
I think it's very important to, it's very important to say, because those who are defending some of this looting say that people got their money back. What happened was that the guarantee was given to the Reserve Bank. Nedbank took over the debt, and it paid the retail depositors no more than 100,000. Those who had less than 100,000. So if you had 170,000 rand, like this society, you wouldn't have gotten the difference. And secondly, money that was deposited by the municipalities has not been paid back. That is very important for us to know. What do you say?
What I say, no, I think the story that Chiridzi has narrated is a very, very painful one. It's a painful story also that demonstrates, I think, what Martin was talking about, is the fact is that our society has a very, very profound crisis of values and of ethics. And we need an ethical revolution in our society.
But you must lead. I'm sorry, Andries, you can't pin this on society. You are the party in government. The fish
we are the party in government. Yes. But this is not a matter that starts and ends with government.
We concede.
And that is why we would also like to thank you for having this discussion here tonight.
No,
it's not a question of sweetening. No, because what you've done here tonight is brought together government, business, civil society, your Chapter 9 institutions, and I think extremely importantly,
you know what we've done. What are you doing to
you have
get the
brought
money back?
together labour and especially your public sector unions that in many cases are at the coalface of this problem.
You are Deputy Minister. The Minister has said that municipalities are going to be sued. I bet they don't have money. How far are you with recovering the money? We need real answers.
No, we need to go after those scoundrels. We are going after the scoundrels in the bank. That is why we have a special investigating unit. That is why the President has established a special investigating unit tribunal, that exactly we can fast track the civil claims to recover monies that have been lost through corruption.
Scope, are you happy with that? I mean, we've got the infrastructure. Okay, finish the thought. Let me finish the thought.
I must emphasize that we need laws. We need institutions.
We need
laws, yes, but we need laws and institutions to meet so that there can be consequences.
Okay.
But also we need a culture of ethics and values that even where there are not enforcement, that people know what is right and wrong and that they act accordingly.
Scopa, public, you represent the public accounts committee. You're satisfied with this? I mean, somebody wrote that we're very good in South Africa at creating the infrastructure. The infrastructure is there. But where are the results to make a difference in the lives of people such as these? Do you have the muscle to deal with this?
Well, I must concede that we do have the laws. The laws are there. The structures are there. But it is enforcement, it is implementation. We in Parliament, together with the Auditor General, bring out all that which is wrong. But the political head, that is the executive, as well as the heads of departments who are supposed to act, just don't act. The police, the hawks who are supposed to investigate, just don't. The NPA that is supposed to prosecute, even cases that have been investigated will take almost 2 years for them to decide whether to prosecute or not. We called the anti-corruption task team before SCOPA to say, tell us what are you doing? And what we found was that the corruption by rich people or people who stole a lot of money, like say 100 million, would only get a 5-year suspended sentence. And out of all the 42 cases that they brought before us, it was only those who had hacked the post office who were given lethal sentences, but the rest, they were all given...
But Themba, it sounds to me as if you who hold public office, and I mean all of you who hold public office, all of you who are in positions of influence, complain just as much as we do, the public. We don't have our hands on the levers of power and decision-making and all of that.
Except that it must be clarified that Parliament cannot investigate. Parliament cannot prosecute.
Sure.
Just like we have now given the Auditor General additional powers to be able to do that which the departments are failing to do, to follow the money and ensure that the money of the public is recovered.
Where's Praisewell? Praisewell, where are you sitting? You've got a question. You've got a comment. What do you want to say?
Thanks very much. My question is related to the issue of Standard Bank and ABSA, where they were involved in the scandal of fixing the rent. And Maria Ramos, as the CEO of ABSA, at some point even apologized for that. So my question is it the government afraid of the big business? Maybe the reason is it because of some of the ministers, for an example, the uncle Pravin Gordhan, he's got shares in those banks. That's why these people are not being arrested or even the government acted on that.
All right. Martin, I know that you don't represent Standard Bank, you don't represent ABSA, but we do need to get your general sense, because that question is valid. And as far as you speak about private sector accountability, and I think on the shares of the minister, it's those shares that are available to the public. Anyone can buy them with their salary. I think that's important to highlight. But the question around private sector accountability, you alluded to it earlier.
Well, really, I discussed that before. There is absolutely no doubt that private sector companies, whether they're listed or not, need to be held accountable. In the case of the allegations that were made against the big banks in terms of collusion and price fixing, there's a Competition Commission inquiry that took place. Now, whether or not that inquiry is appropriately prosecuted is something that we need to discuss. I'd like to make another point which is associated with it, and I think that Themba Godi has alluded to it. All of us are shocked, frankly, by the scale and depth of corruption that is being demonstrated in this country. Many of us intuitively felt that there were problems. Until Bosasa became a public matter, I'm sure you'll come on to it, frankly, none of us had any understanding as to the size and the scale of that particular problem.
And Pony, you're also shaking your head. I'm thinking 10 years of
What I'm saying is it was not adequately in the public eye.
Do you
No.
And what we need to decide is the extent to which we prioritize pursuing critical issues and indeed holding people to account. And
are you frustrated that the public reacts when it's too late? I mean, I read about Bosasa 10 years ago. They started on the Balfour when he was minister, and then the discounts on cars and the forensic report sitting at NPA. Maybe the public must take responsibility for not reacting, like Life Esidimeni as well, reported long before it kind of exploded in the way that it did.
It shows that our public is not well read. We don't read, we don't know what's going on in our own country.
Okay, let's take a break. According to the Global Economic Crime Survey produced by PwC, South Africa is the world leader in money laundering, bribery, corruption, procurement fraud, asset misappropriation, and cybercrime. That's right, folks. We get the gold. Can we change the culture? This question and more after the break. Welcome back to the big debate on corruption. 77% of South African organizations say they've been victims of economic crime and fraud in the past 2 years, compared to 49% in the rest of the world. And that's mostly private sector entities. Why are we the world leaders? And is this just something we just have to live with? Kaya Stole, I want to bring you in here. I really want to bring you in here because we have Steinhoff. And we give it fancy names like accounting irregularities. PIC was an investor in Steinhoff, Lancaster, and all of that. So government pensioners are going to be impoverished. Furthermore, we heard former President Mr. Mbeki talking about it's not illegal, but it's immoral. Shortly after he became deputy president of the ANC, Cyril Ramaphosa said that we need to go after companies who make money disappear through offshore accounts. And then it emerges that while he was chairman of MTN, most of the profits it made in Africa, Uganda, Ghana, and Nigeria were taken offshore to Dubai, where there's no tax, and Mauritius, where they didn't even have a base, but a postal address only. So that's exactly what it is. What do we do about private sector corruption and cooking the books, and what do we call that?
Yeah, I think the important thing to note here is that, corruption happens when you've got a lot of enablers that actually make it happen. So a lot of people tend to think it's a very binary analysis where it's either public sector corruption or private sector corruption. But in instances where private sector or public sector corruption is happening, what you're seeing is that there is this web of intricate links between the public and the private sector, where interestingly it is the private sector that lends credibility. It lends a veneer of credibility to what happens in the corruption, particularly in the public sector. So what we've seen over time is that if you want to get away with particular things, there are some particular brand names that as soon as you associate yourself with them, it then simply says to the people, you can trust this brand, so therefore nobody makes questions what happens there. You've seen that in particular talk about auditing firms, especially the banks themselves. So as soon as I have a stamp of authority that comes from someone who's got a particular position in society, so suddenly anything that I can do, I can get away with it. So now the key question here that you need to try and take a step back is how do we actually keep interrogating particular conversations, particular transactions in a manner that doesn't elevate people beyond this element of scrutiny. Now, unfortunately, what we've seen is that we've got this wonderful ruling party that has spent the past 10 to 15 years dismantling all these institutes of accountability. So, of course, it is nice for Mr. Andrew Snell to say that we've got the laws. Well, it is the ANC that exists to dismantle and undermine those particular laws. So we do have this particular problem, and the private sector is just as complicit and perhaps even more elevated than the public sector itself. Remember, we are lucky in that in the public sector, we at least have Section 217 of the Constitution to try and defend us, to say these are the things that should be happening. In the private sector, as soon as somebody says it was a business decision, then suddenly the ability to interrogate it disappears, and that's our great tragedy.
That's what you've been uncovering, right? That's what you've been uncovering, that wicked web between public and private. That's how it happens. I don't think the juxtaposition is helpful at all, but I'll get some thoughts on this, because we kind of get trapped in this debate on who's more corrupt than the other. And I know, Kaya, that's not what you were saying, but we need to interrogate those and, quite frankly, not trust any of them.
Absolutely. We are underestimating what Kaya is saying, where I cannot overestimate how important everything is that he said just there. How the private sector and the public sector work together in a web to create a scheme to extract money from the public and from the taxpayers, what is important here. And again, to go back to what he says, is how do we stop this? How do we cancel this? The only way is for repercussions to be seen, for people to go to jail. Now, I hear people say it's not the ANC's fault then. People, especially behind us, say it's not the ANC's fault, it's individuals in the Hawks and the National Prosecuting Authority. That's absolutely not true. The ANC has started from the beginning or the middle term of Mr. Mbeki's term to change and to influence the Scorpions and the police. There were certain changes made in the justice sector, and certain people injected there to sort of shield certain people from scrutiny.
Ms. Olivia, let me bring you in here. I mean, you continue to amplify your voice against corruption. Are you hopeful that the institutions will kick in? And I do want you to address something that the UDM has been accused of, that when one of your own, the Mayor Bobani in Nelson Mandela Bay municipality, was facing allegations, the bus system in the city, you turned a blind eye.
Firstly, I think we need to depoliticize our systems. It starts from the time a ruling party decides to usurp the powers of an institution like Public Service Commission, thereby deploying people to be DGs or chief directors and so on. People who have no clue, no institutional memories of those. But as we see now on Bosasa, you can see that Bosasa, firstly, it was a women's league company, then changed to Bosasa, but they are using Bosasa as a conduit. And the people who are facilitating this are ministers and DGs or commissioners. And that money goes back to the headquarters of the party. Coming back to the question on Bobani, you will recall that when Trolip raised the issue, we said to him and DA, go back, investigate. They appointed PwC auditors.
Yeah.
And guess what? The first interim report, there was no mention of Bobani. Final report, they kept it secret because it didn't say anything about Bobani.
The Hawks affidavit, though?
And then I said to them, if you want to, you find that Bobani has done something wrong, don't even come to us as a mayor. Table your findings in the council. Let the council have a resolution through the ethics committee, then we will act.
Okay. I mean, ANC, government, Bantu Olumisa says you've usurped the powers of the institutions that are meant to fight corruption, that certain companies are used as a conduit to channel money to entities of the ANC.
I think let's start off by putting the record straight. The ANC is the party that was at the forefront of drafting the constitution that we have today. The very constitution that makes provision.
The very constitution that some are breaking within your
party. The very constitution that sets up the National Prosecuting Authority, an independent public protector, an independent judiciary, a range of organizations that are meant to put checks and balances in place.
We know that, Andries.
Yes, but I think we need to remind ourselves because sometimes we seem to forget it.
But your members need to be reminded of that if they're breaking the law.
We have never made any secret of the fact that there are members of ours who have flouted those provisions.
And you don't want them in your movement?
We do not want them in our movement. We do not want those wrong things to be done.
Micah, Martin, I'll give you a chance. They don't believe.
That is why we are working to rectify those things. Take the National Prosecuting.
Okay, just hold that thought. I'll give you a chance to speak right now. And also want to hear from the Competition Commission when we come back. Are we winning the fight against corruption? If not, what needs to be done? After the break, we get the final results of our poll and we hear from our audience in studio. Don't go away. Okay, welcome back to the big debate on corruption, coming to you on SABC2, SABC News Channel 404 and SAFM. Well, the results are in, and this is how you voted. From over 16,000 votes, 85% say we are failing in the fight against corruption. That's pretty unanimous. Let's hear from our studio audience. Do we have nurses, teachers, public servants? Sembat, I believe that you are from the union of, you're calling it the union of choice, the PSA. What do you want to say?
I think you said that I would...
You will, in just a moment. I'll give you a chance.
I just want to carry on with the point that I made. Is that...
You'll have the last one. Let's hear the words. Yeah, wait. I'm going to give you a chance, I promise. I'm going to give you a chance.
No, I was mid-argument.
I know. I'm going to give you a chance. I promise. I promise.
The point is...
Well, all the questions are directed.
No.
Let him speak. I'll give you a chance.
The point is that we are undergoing a new dawn. We're undergoing a renewal.
Oh, that's what he wanted to say.
No, in a very
I'll
systematic
come to you.
way.
I promise.
We are rebuilding organizations. We are restoring trust in
Okay,
organizations.
let's hear whether our workers believe you. Let's hear whether the workers believe you.
Let us
Carry
look at
on.
the national, let us look
We've
at the
got the
National
microphone.
Prosecuting
Carry on.
Authority.
Carry on.
Thanks.
I will give you a chance, Andries, I promise you.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
Actually, maybe the mistake you made, Red, was to call my name. He's familiar with it.
Oh, he's familiar with your name.
He's my
Is that
name,
why he
yes.
doesn't want you to speak? Carry on, please.
And
Carry on.
I know for a fact that you're about to create the Department of Corruption in the Parliament. And I know who will be the minister there. But in any event...
Okay, not hypothetical stuff. Let's deal with
Correct.
your reality.
My question is simple and straightforward. What stops the president from withdrawing the ministers, especially those who have been fingered and proven to be corrupt, instead of redeploying them into other countries as South African ambassadors?
Andries, I knew the question was coming to you, and you were going to get a chance to finish that last thought and then answer this question. You see, that's how it works.
Thank you very, very much.
And the second one is very short. Public servants like myself, immediately I'm involved in corruption, even if it's 10 rands or 20 rands. I get blacklisted. I'll never get a job. But your ministers who have been found to be correct, they always get away with it. Thank you.
Andries?
Well, let me start with the last point that you made. You're very, very corrupt. You're very, very correct. You are very... You are very...
Okay.
You're very, very correct.
Correct.
You're very, very correct about corruption. And that is that as an ANC government, we have put in place laws and regulations in local government that ensures that anyone who's found guilty of a disciplinary transgression involving, amongst others, corruption, can be excluded from being employed anywhere in local government for up to 10 years. And that legislation is being implemented. We have made no bones about it, that those provisions should apply both to civil servants as well as to political leadership. At the moment, there are institutions like the National Prosecuting Authority that are having their credibility rebuilt. We have seen the appointment of Advocate Shamila Batoy through a transparent and open process.
Micah, we give them a chance. They're changing. SARS has just got a new
Similarly,
commissioner.
SARS has got a new commissioner again, appointed through an open and transparent process. It's that process. That process will
okay,
take
let's give
time.
other people a chance, Andries. It will take time. It will take time.
But you know, the ANC...
Quickly, Micah.
The ANC is speaking with two heads.
Okay, let's hear the ANC is doing
so
what?
Mr. Nel can come here and sing sweet songs to us about how wonderful the Constitution is and all that Cyril Ramaphosa is doing to roll back all that Zuma did. But some of you may have read earlier today the exposés on Ace Magashule, one of the top 6.
Which he obviously denies.
That are absolutely damning. There's a whole book on it. You can go and read it. But one of the things that that came up was looting in relation to an RDP project, right? And what was the ANC's response today? It was to put out a rabid press release accusing the journalist of being a Stratcom agent. That to me...
And it's not the first time it's happened. Even with Uganda corruption, that's what it was. The messenger was shot, basically. Okay, so when we come back, I'll ask our panel to respond to the poll. Don't go away and don't miss the second hour of our debate coming up shortly on SABC News YouTube channel, or visit bigdebate.live/watch. Also watch SABC 2 at 10 p.m. on Wednesday night to catch the repeat of the full 2 hours. See you in a moment. Hello again from the Big Debate live in Johannesburg. We're talking about corruption and how we can hold people to account. We do, by the way, have elections on the 8th of May. Perhaps that's one way. In any case, let's hear the last word from our panel in this first half of our debate. Micah, what do citizens do? How do we take back our authority and agency?
We can start by not being corrupt, but that's only going to get us so far. I think we have to realize that corruption, I hate to say it, is here to stay.
Is it inevitable?
We have to, it's a matter now of managing corruption. You know, the ANC...
That is so heartbreaking, cynical.
It's true. I think, look, we've had decades now of private sector, pro-capitalist growth path that have not delivered. I was speaking earlier about the structural issues at stake here, the foundations of corruption. And those particular growth paths that the ANC-led government has taken us on have not delivered industrialization, have not delivered jobs, have not delivered decent employment for people, have failed to transform the economy. We have a large black aspirant middle class that's in a very precarious position, that has been locked out of the private sector, that didn't get the benefit of massive empowerment deals, BEE deals that made people like Ramaphosa so rich. And so where did they go? They turned to the state. And how do you get money out of the state? Well, tenders. And there's such fierce competition around tenders because, you know, there are only so many tenders to go around. And that breeds rent-seeking and corruption that often turns violent. So I hate to say it because I know it's a swear word to a lot of people, but we do need some sort of radical economic transformation. We need redistribution. We need to ensure that there is...
Martin, what do you say? How do we get out of this?
Well, I agree that we need all of the issues that have been discussed to be addressed. The fact of the matter is that we don't get out of it if we have a culture of total impunity. And that's what we have currently. And we need to deal with it, and we need to deal with it decisively. The second is that we need to praise and laud whistleblowing. The truth of the matter is that most people actually have access to and knowledge of corruption that is taking place, small-scale and large-scale corruption. We need to legitimize it, we need to prosecute it. The third I'd like to say is, and this has been raised before, we need to commence lifestyle audits. We've talked about it repeatedly, it hasn't happened. We all wonder how it is that X or Y or Z enjoys the lifestyle that we do. We suspect we know the answer. We need to address it and interrogate it aggressively.
Very quickly, Andries, what do we do? What do you promise us? The poll says corruption is here. We're not winning the fight against it.
It's not a question of promises. It's a question of taking hands as government, labour, business, civil society, strengthening the hands of our law enforcement agencies, policing ourselves, calling ourselves out, ensuring that we build a culture of non-corruption, holding each other to account, and implementing those measures that are contained in the ANC's election manifesto.
We'll leave it here. Stay tuned for the second part of our debate. We carry on with our debate. Is it Buleng? You've got a comment or a question. Carry on, please.
Yes. Ramaphosa's son get money from Busasa. So how can we trust, as we called, South African president?
Look, first of all, I think you said it very correctly. It's the president's son. So let us talk about the president's son. I think the president, when he was answering questions in Parliament, made it very, very clear that if his son has committed any wrong, that he would be the first to take his son to the police station. So,
wait, let him finish.
Yeah.
Let him finish the question. Yeah.
So, I don't know why you then can't trust the president of the Republic, because he's made his position very, very clear.
Well, I don't think we should trust politicians, quite frankly. But anyway, I suppose the question here is that, you know, let's just go back to what Mr. Mbeki said in the insert. He said it's not illegal, but it's immoral. It's true that the president's son has not been found guilty of any crime. He's an adult. I think 95% of the time my mother doesn't know what I get up to. But the issue here is that the president should have worried when he saw that his son is doing business with a company called Busasa that has made billions from government tenders. I guess what we're getting at here, Andries, is to be a little bit more circumspect, to not abuse proximity, to not ask people to only look at life in a one-dimensional way, that if the law doesn't forbid it, then it's right. The proximity to the president and the timing of that contract should make a reasonable person ask questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And I think when the president answered questions in Parliament, he made it very clear that he called his son and all family members and explained that he's being entrusted with a position of high responsibility and that he expects them to behave both in a legal as well as an ethical manner.
Okay, let's bring in Sipongwema here. Okay, you are from the Competition Commission. We were speaking earlier about collusion. I mean, you've had your hands full. And I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, that you ran out of a budget to investigate some of the complaints that came before you. But at the same time, something positive happened. Your office has been given teeth. You've been given more powers to act. Tell us about that. I mean, are complaints increasing?
Thank you. Yes, indeed, the complaints are increasing. There's been a lot of response from the public. There's a lot of response from business as well. But I think what we have discovered is that cartels, collusion, the misdemeanors in terms of the Competition Act are so pervasive. And businesses do know what they are doing, but they take advantage of the fact that we do not have money. If you take the case of the banks that was mentioned earlier, we have charged about 19 banks. ABSA came to us, they are our biggest witness. They said to us, this is what the banks get to when we don't see. And we have now laid our hands on evidence, and even from our international counterparts, that show with no doubt that the banks have been manipulating the rent, the banks have been robbing their customers. But what the banks are doing, they are used because they have deep pockets. So they keep us in the game. They make sure that we sweat. They challenge everything that we do. And they know that we don't have the money to be in perpetual litigation. So they do that, they use that, but they also in the process collude, because amongst themselves you get the feeling that they are planning around this case, because each of them will then challenge one aspect or the other. So if you're facing 19 accused, you can imagine how many times you're going to go to and fro in court. So since we laid the charges about 2 years ago, we still haven't gone far. They are still challenging us, we are still far. We have put the merits on the table, none of them have responded to it. Only a bank in America said we are guilty, sorry. They paid 70 million. ABSA are the first ones to come to us, say we are up to no good. But yes, those kinds of issues are pervasive, and we think that that's scratching the top, and we still need to go deeper.
Martin, I know you don't represent these banks, but just speaking generally, people are angry with banks, and with good reason. What do you say?
Well, banks are in an invidious position because they do lubricate, both for good and sometimes for evil, the financial system and indeed the trading system. There's no doubt that it is very easy in large institutions for inappropriate activity to take place and to fail to be detected. And what we've seen over the last several years, not just in South Africa but globally, has been a significant increase in the level of oversight and compliance to try and guard against this behavior. The reality is, if there are people who want to abuse systems, they will find ways and means so to do. I think we all know that. The banks in South Africa, in my opinion, for the most part, are upright citizens. There are specific cases that are being prosecuted, as we know, but we need to ensure that we work with financial institutions, because the challenges that we have economically are only going to be addressed if we can mobilize very significant sums of capital, and the sources of that capital are primarily, first and foremost, the banks and the insurance companies. So let's ensure that we work with them in a constructive and collaborative way, whilst holding them, by the way, as I said at the very outset, to account.
Dale, that must make you very happy.
No, actually it doesn't, because I'm going to go back to the structural problem. See, what we're doing is we're looking at corruption as money changes hands here. So
it doesn't. Okay, hold on. Dale, let's go to you quickly. Have the mic, yep.
We're looking at corruption in terms of so-and-so gets a certain amount of money. But what we're not doing is looking at the root cause, which is what Micah was talking about, which is this. Why is it, for example, that private sector in this country from 2003 to 2012 has quadrupled its cash reserves and its profits? Why is that the case? Because at the local level, they cannot pay miners a decent living wage. That's why they get all the money to then make people corrupt. So if we start dealing if we start dealing with, if we start enforcing our labor, the labor department has been completely gutted. I understand there's a few hundred inspectors to inspect hundreds of thousands of businesses for labor practices. So what we're doing is our system has allowed private capital to simply exploit the entire population, gain huge amounts of money, and then buy off politicians. We need to go to the root of the cause. What we're doing is addressing it here.
I want to say that an institution like the Competition Commission is something that was spearheaded by an ANC government. Very often, yes, it was spearheaded, but
people are not disagreeing with you. They are mortified that you're stating the obvious when there's such a person. We know that.
Yes,
but
and again, in the face of considerable opposition.
What are you saying, Mr. Holomisa?
The success of the competition.
Is to beef up their institution, give them money and other resources. That's all.
The Competition Commission.
Why are you saying the money part? Are you affected as a public
we have serious problems with resources in terms of effectively conducting investigations that need skilled forensic things, you know. So we definitely have been shortchanged by the government. I want to put it on record.
Put your money where your mouth is.
Yes,
that's what they're saying.
We need probably 3 times four times the kind of budget that we need right now.
No, but Advocate
You set up all
Malunga, I think also, let us be fair.
Yes.
Remember, I've been in Parliament for 25 years. I was part of drafting. I was part of drafting the Public Protector Act.
Yes.
When the Public Protector's office started, it was the Public Protector and half a dozen staff members.
Yes.
Today, the Office of the Public Protector is running at a budget of over 200 million rand. It has hundreds of staff, and it has offices throughout the country.
But it needs more.
That has changed.
I think let us not say that there is not a commitment on the part of an ANC government to support our Chapter 9 institutions.
Okay, I think what I'm hearing is...
We'll take that as a
Competition
commitment.
Commission.
We'll take that as a
Again,
commitment.
that was an institution that was set up where nothing like that existed. What has it done in the period that it has existed? It has tackled your big companies that have hit the poorest of the poor because of colluding around something like the price of bread. Yeah. At the moment, they're investigating collusion around edible oils. Those are the matters that this Competition Commission...
Okay, I think what I'm hearing... Okay, we must give other people a chance.
What we need...
Wayne, what do you want to say? Let's give other people... I think the point that is being made is that the amount that is available is not commensurate with the extent of the work, right?
Absolutely. There needs to... And I totally...
unfortunately, we don't have infinite
resources
in our society.
Okay, Wayne from Outer. Wayne from Outer, yes.
I think the fact that the Competition Commission and the Public Protector's Office is still not able to do the work with the amount of resources that you've put in is a sign and a symbol of exactly what's happening here. What you need to do is give them more resources, because when they get to the bottom of the problems, then we're going to become a far better country. Your government is the administration, and you're interfering with the administration through allowing your politicians to capture treasury. They haven't been allowed to make sure that the local government is able to operate properly. So I'd like to put this to you, Deputy Mr. Nell. In local government, you say that you will tackle those municipal managers and mayors, but it's musical chairs with these guys. They move around from municipality to municipality. It's not about trying to push the law. It's about the moral dilemma that you've got. You're not taking action soon enough. These people are getting away with massive corruption. They're not paying their bills. Those communities are collapsing. 67% of our municipalities are now defunct and dysfunctional. What are you going to do about it, just instead of just giving lip service? We are engaging with them. If you want to walk hand in hand with civil society, we are here to meet you and help you fix those municipalities.
I'll give you a chance. I'll give it. Hold on, Andres, you need to show discipline now. Hold on. I know the question has been said in press conferences. You know this. Sometimes 3 people ask a question and they come to you. Sure. Hold that thought. Let's go to you, sir.
No, look, I think over and above the pumping money into the competition committees, the problem is that even when the private sector comes forward to confess crimes, the highest penalty they can be given is 10% of their profit. And what do? They shove those 10% into the consumers. If the banks come and confess that they've been colluding and fixing the rand-dollar exchange, all you do is to fine them a maximum of 10% and they walk away. We seem not to be able to prosecute white-collar crime in this country. That's our problem. The private sector, as we speak today, have been refusing to set up an ethics committee that's going to regulate them on how they enforce labor laws, including the corruption laws. They want to self-regulate themselves. They don't want to be supervised. So we think that over and above the issue of putting money into the competition commission, the penalty that must be given to those who make big businesses must be commiserated so that it serves as a deterrent, because 10% doesn't serve as a deterrent.
Indeed, and it's been said many times, Sipho, absolutely. I mean, hold on, Andres. Whether we're talking about the construction cartel, building of World Cup Stadium, the public was unanimous that the fines are a drop in the ocean. But I understand that there were some legislative restrictions, of course.
Yes, indeed, because we're a creature of the law. We don't make the law, we apply it. The law that Parliament gave us was 10%, but fortunately, Parliament has increased now, that's to 25%. And there are a number of other things that they've improved in terms of us effecting and being more effective in terms of dealing with these offenses. So we think that we are being given more, but of course the issue is always around resources. And unfortunately, I must say that we had to revise some of our targets, given the fact that you have to make sure you prioritize because you do not have the resources to do some of the things. But we understand some of the issues facing the country. But of course, in terms of our fight, that is going to give us, or going to be a setback a little bit. But the law has now been changed, so we are much more effective in terms of those penalties.
Martin, you're excited about suggestions of regulation of the private sector and more fines for your
buddies?
What
we're talking about actually is the Competition Commission Amendment Bill. And their government worked very closely with all of the NEDLAC partners, including business, organised labour and community, in revising them. And the fines that we're talking about, and these debates took place in the chamber at NEDLAC, was about what was an appropriate level of penalisation that should take place for not only single but also multiple infringements, because what we've seen is that those who infringe once infringe repeatedly. Now, of course, there are those who would like to increase those levels of penalties. Our view is that actually what we need to do is look at the root cause once again and make sure that we can eradicate behaviour, not just penalise it when it becomes manifested. Because I think what we're talking about here, and we need to really, I think, accept this, is that there's a fundamental systemic issue which is actually a moral issue. The difference between what is legally correct and what is morally permissible can be nothing or everything. I think we need to apply our minds and our judgment as to what is appropriate and morally and ethically correct, because if we don't have that guiding star, then I have to say as a country we lose our direction. And I suspect that that is exactly what we've seen transpire over the past 10 to 15 years.
You're very good at reading my mind, Martin, because you've just taken us back to Thabo Mbeki, because I think we do need to talk about those tax havens, what is illegal versus what is ethical and so on. What do you think? Do we need legislation to stop the illicit financial flows? What do you think?
Absolutely. There's no doubt whatsoever that we need to stop illicit financial flows.
Asset
forfeiture is about that.
I think the one thing that is lacking, and we're discussing with Martin during the break, is over and above the greater protection of whistleblowers is really asset forfeiture, because people get to keep the ill-gotten gains. They get to keep the big cars, the big houses, and so forth, and that makes a mockery of the system. So corruption, people are corrupt so that they gain things. So where if you hit them where it hurts the most is where you take them back.
Okay, so Andres, I'm giving you a chance to respond to Wayne's question, but also what Martin firmly put on the table, lifestyle audits.
Absolutely. I think first of all, in answer to Wayne's question, we would very much want to strengthen that partnership between government, labour, civil society and business. I just want to correct you. I mean, it is simply not true that within local government it's possible to play musical chairs anymore. It's not anymore, because we've put regulations in place that the moment you are found guilty of a disciplinary or a criminal transgression, your name goes on a database. That database needs to be checked every time that you want to be employed anywhere in local government. You can be excluded for up to 10 years from being employed anywhere. So the musical chairs are gone. Secondly,
at local level.
Secondly, we agree fully that we need asset forfeiture. That is why the President has established a tribunal linked to the Special Investigating Unit, because the problem that we've had up to now, SIU investigates, it comes with a report, it recommends that assets should be forfeited, that gets logged into our normal court system, it takes forever. That is why we have a fast-tracked tribunal. Second, on the Competition Commission, I think it would be important to say also that the Competition Act has been amended to provide not just for fines, but for criminal sanctions. People can go to jail for those infractions. And I think it's important to say that. I think just ultimately, what we need is to build trust in our society. We need trust in our society based on morality.
But why are you like this? What's wrong with trust?
We need to build trust in our society so that when social partners...
Who must trust whom? We must trust you.
No, all of us need to trust each other. When workers sit in a forum and negotiate with bosses, they need to know that if we're saying let us moderate wages in order to achieve longer term objectives, that at the end of the year the bosses are not going to give themselves the massive bonuses.
Okay.
We need to know that when government invests money in developing our industries, that money is going to go to developing the productive capacity
but that's what's being said.
of our economy, not being exported out of the country.
What do you have to say? I want to go to Mr. Holomisa.
What I'm going to say is that they have been in government for 25 years. We've been talking about the problems. We don't have the solutions. Come the 8th of May, we need to get rid. The ANC must sit down and then give the government...
They say you are dreaming.
Because we have the problem. We are sitting in number one in the country because of them. Okay. They must sit down and let the good people leave.
Okay. Mr. Holomisa, let's just go back to, I don't want to lose this theme around assets forfeiture. We've seen, I'm thinking about a particular minister as well, whether it was Dina Pule or that minister found guilty by the public protector to have misused funds, all of that. It doesn't seem to hurt to be found guilty in South Africa today. It doesn't seem to demand anything of a party whose member has been found guilty or censored by the Constitutional Court or whichever court. Life just goes on as normal. I hear Mr. Nell talking about at municipal level, this is not allowed, this is not allowed. But what we're seeing playing out is the musical chairs, exactly that. Just give me a sense of what you think will happen out of these processes, the commissions that we are seeing. Are you confident that much of the money that has been stolen, misappropriated, whatever word you choose, can be traced and returned?
It will depend whether there is a political will to do so. And I hope that the voters of South Africa will never again put all their eggs in one basket, making sure that we build the checks and balances. I'm looking forward to the day. In fact, let me add this. Had it not been for the opposition parties, small parties like ours, Cyril Ramaphosa wouldn't be a president today, because it is the ANC in parliament which told South Africans that Zuma has not misused the government monies in Kandla. We had to go to the Constitutional Court in order to do so. So that pressure still has to be there after these commissions of inquiries. We have been betting on a wicket of anti-corruption, and we are still occupying that crease. We are still going to hit you for 4s and 6s.
In the work that you're doing with the paperwork and all of that, it's a simple question. The work that you've seen, the evidence that you've seen, can money be traced? Do you know exactly where it went, who got what, and how?
Yeah, exactly. So in the VBS saga, you can specifically see Mr. Kabelo Matsepe got a Range Rover financed by VBS, and he paid very few rands for it.
Remind us again who's Kabelo Matsepe, ANC Youth
ANC
League
Youth
member
League,
who
yes.
lobbied the municipalities to put their money into.
Exactly, yeah. Mr. Danny Msiza got a lot of money. The KPMG auditor who lied about R1 billion not being in VBS got 30 million rand. So you can trace the money. It's not that difficult. And when we go back to asset forfeiture, that is exactly the problem that we have. We have a proper trace of where the money flowed. If the Hawks and the NPA are doing their job properly, this should have been, their assets should have been frozen, because that money is now either abroad already or it's being spent on luxuries. The same in SARS. I wrote about Mr. Jonas Makwakwa, the second in command, and I traced money of how he spent 3 times more sometimes than what he actually got as a salary from SARS. Now, how is that possible that that person is not arrested
But one of the accusations, particularly against you from the EFF, is that Mr. Brian Shivambu's name doesn't come up, Mr. Julius Malema's name doesn't come up. Why do you insist that something stinks there?
Absolutely. So Mr. Brian Shivambu's name is mentioned in the report. He received 60 million into
Floyd, I beg your pardon, I meant Floyd.
Yes, into a slush fund named Schameka. But I can see from the Schameka, money went to 2 companies, Mahuna and Grand Azania, and people are injected as fronts into these companies, and Mr. Floyd Shivambu received money directly from Schameka. He cannot deny it because I can see it.
Okay, Dale, I want to bring you in here because we were talking about financial outflows, we're talking about front companies, money being taken offshore, and so on. Just share with us how this kind of thing happens, because people almost expect for there to be an accusation that Reedy received money from Polly and you'd be able to track it directly. But these networks seem to be opaque, and that's the idea. They're designed to make your head spin and not be able to pinpoint that journey from the source and to the recipient.
The catalyst for impunity is secrecy.
Absolutely.
And what has happened is not only globally, but in South Africa, what we've had, a veil of secrecy has been thrown across here. So when, for example, let's just take Marikana, and let's take our president right now, who was on the board of Lonmin at the time. When we as civil society asked, is Lonmin taking money offshore? Is it? No, 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 it's not happening. We said, give us the information. They said, that's confidentiality, that's business. So what we have is we have a situation where every time we try to access information, we're told by private sector that's confidential. Third party. Government, it's national security, national interest. So when you have secrecy and the demos, in other words, the people don't know, you can't have democracy. You cannot have democracy without information. And the Promotion of Access to Information Act, which is a good piece of legislation, has been completely gutted by the ruling party. Because I can tell you, as part of the Right to Know campaign, we've been fighting for 10 years to get access to information on a whole range of things, and 90% of our requests have been refused. When that happens, when secrecy happens, so the Lonmin, others can just take money offshore, they can do these things, we have to open up that cave, we have to shine light in there. Once we do that, people will be so angry that they'll make sure that the politicians don't do it again. We'll make our laws stronger, we'll make the regulatory authorities stronger, and we'll make our democracy stronger when we do that.
Okay, a question from you, and then Andries, I'm going to give you a chance. A question?
Good evening, everyone.
Okay.
I just have one question that I want to ask, and it will be directed straight to Scopa. I've got an issue with us talking about banks and all that. But we don't speak of the Reserve Bank. There's been gold that has been disappearing from the Reserve Bank. No one is talking to that. There's been notes that have been printed outside South Africa. No one is talking to that. Who holds them accountable? The Reserve Bank. Thank you.
Well, the Reserve Bank reports to the Standing Committee on Finance. That is the committee in Parliament that supervises the Reserve Bank. Whether they have been doing their work effectively or not, I wouldn't want to be judging my colleagues, but I believe that the public will be there to see. I think there is this debate around the positioning of the Reserve Bank, whether it should be fully publicly owned. What the implications of that will be depends on the policy trajectory of the country. which determines to what extent are we able to use public institutions to serve the public good, or to what extent are public institutions overridden by private interests, seeing that over 70% of our economy is in private hands, and it is private capital that informs the overall trajectory of public morality.
Your question, ma'am.
Thank you. This question is to Honorable Bantu Alamisa. A lot has been spoken tonight about local government, and I think in the city of Johannesburg, the UDM is in coalition with the DA. Now, if we are so honest and so sincere, the mayor gave Field Band organization, an NGO, 11 million, while there are thousands of other deserving NGOs. COPE was part of it. UDM was part of it. And the EFF was quiet about it. The same happened with the Avis contract. Avis had the contract already. But because the DA could not cope, they are then being, it sounds,
it's a beautiful line,
but
DA could not cope.
definitely,
Okay.
so the EFF decided that contract will be cancelled and go to another company who they are aligned with. The same other thing happened is that now, just a few weeks ago in council, the ward councillor of Ward 58, an investigation took 6 months ago. The mayor kept the report. He never brought it to council, and your councillor is part of that. Now, we're talking here about corruption, and yet we are quiet and silent about where we are involved. And I think we should all come out clean and say, we have all erred, we have done a number of things that's wrong, and how are we going to correct it? I thank you.
And just to add on that list, there was Glad Africa in Tshwane, and there it's not even an accusation or speculation. The Auditor General found that that contract was irregularly awarded. I'm just adding another example of the malfeasance.
That the DA was here. But be that as it may, I've taken note of these allegations.
Wait. Let him finish.
And we have to condemn if there are wrong things proven. So I can assure you, madam, I will take these allegations, write a formal letter, an open letter to the mayor, and also to the Minister of Local Government.
But why now? It's been in the press for ages.
No.
Is it because May 8 is wrong?
No. I say I don't have facts. I don't want to lie to you. But I'm promising you I will take an action. What more do you want?
You see, I think this just illustrates also the difference between the ANC and many, many other parties. Other parties will pretend to be high and holy, that there's no problem, whatever. As the ANC, we are a party that is also self-critical. We take criticism from outside seriously, and we recognize where we make mistakes. We have a capacity to self-correct that we are engaging in at the moment.
I can't let you make that false claim.
But let me just finish. Let me finish.
All right.
Let me finish.
Okay.
You say that there are no consequences.
Wait,
that there are no consequences. No one feels any consequences. Scarcely a few weeks ago, the chairperson of ICASA, who happened to hold a senior position in Parliament at some stage, was sentenced to 15 years imprisonment.
At
the end of last year, the MEC for Finance in the Northern Cape started serving 15 years in prison. So to say that there are no consequences, that no one is ever sentenced, is simply not true. The law takes its own course. Due process must be followed, but we are committed to having those cases pursued to finality.
No. I will go back to what Polly said, that perhaps you will dupe people who don't read. The fact of the matter is, on the ICASA matter, you appointed him despite the evidence. You are claiming that the courts did this. It's the courts, not you. You acting belatedly. Secondly, you are claiming you are a party that takes action. You didn't on Nkandla. You had to be hauled to, oh, no, let me finish. You had to be hauled to court. Third, when evidence, tangible, stinking evidence of state capture in this current term. I say in this current term because we had state capture in apartheid South Africa. It doesn't, that's not what we're discussing now. When it first happened, your party was in denial. You said that there are only a few individuals. You protected a former president who was the torchbearer thereof. You supported him in parliament when there were motions of no confidence brought against him. You cannot make the claims that you're making.
Really, but your argument is extremely problematic.
That's fine.
Because it puts the ANC in an absolutely no-win situation. So
and yours is all win. You are just claiming victories.
where we establish structures in state through the due processes, where we set up courts, where we set up a prosecuting authority. So where those structures do their work, then you say, no, it was the court that did that.
But it was. On Nkandla, it was the court. It was the court that acted on that when opposition parties took the matter. You ignored the public protector. You said, and I quote, recommendations are just recommendations.
I've just given you examples of where members...
The courts are censoring. What I'm saying, Andries, what I'm saying is,
but I've
the courts
given you
should not have to rule on these things if you did the right thing as government and the party. There was no need for the matter to, the powers of the public protector to be adjudicated in court because the constitution was clear on the matter. It is precisely because you were ignoring the constitution that these small parties went to court.
No.
In parliament, you
That's a factual matter. It's not an opinion. It's a factual matter.
And when cadres go to prison, you carry them on your shoulder.
You carry them on your shoulder, you come...
How about...
Okay, you don't have a microphone.
How about Chancellor House and Hitachi?
Okay.
So we've got a problem with Eskom at the moment. One of the problems with Eskom...
We talked about that last week.
One of the problems with Eskom is Medupi and Kusile, which billions and billions and billions of rand have been spent on. But let's go back. Chancellor House had an inside investment with Hitachi Corporation to make billions on Medupi and Kusile. That money went straight into the investment arm of the ANC. That money has gone.
And also, hold on,
now,
just on that.
If there was a morality, if there was a real commitment to uproot corruption, the ANC would say, we'll give back the money. We'll give back the money that we made, the billions that we made through our investment corporation in Hitachi, because we can see that it was put into very corrupt relationships. And in fact, Medupi and Kusile can't even deliver the basics of the electricity.
And I think it's important to tell our audience that on Hitachi paid a fine in the US admitting that there was corruption in the South African deal. Not only that, the president-elect of the World Bank now, when asked what he's going to change at the World Bank, he said the way in which the World Bank gives loans. And they asked, what do you mean? He says a lot of these transactions are corrupt. And he was asked for a case study. Which country in particular? South Africa. That's what he said. Anyway.
And now Ed Bosasa saying over rallies. That's our money.
Ridi, I think the other problem and the angle that we should explore as well is that what does this corruption do in society? And I can clearly say right now, a lot of people who are not working now aspire to become rich in an ill-gotten way, like it is happening currently. So what we need as a society in general is that we need few or one example that is going to be clear, where somebody is going to be locked away and nobody else is going to come back and say, I wish to be a rich person, because we know that most of the people are getting this wealth out of ill-gotten wealth. But the other problem that we have is that even in the cabinets that we have, some of them, there's clear examples that are underperforming. They don't receive a firing line at some point. And we do need to find the best way that as a country, even if we don't make a lot of noise, but somebody must take accountability. It should not take longer to act on these people, even if they're in the cabinet or at a secured position, including
Which
in the
organization?
local government.
DENOSA, you nurses, right?
Definitely.
Just very, very quickly on the PIC matter, what are the conversations at DENOSA? Because these are workers, government workers who are about to lose their pensions. We heard from the PSA as well. What's going on there?
Well, our clear stance is that the heads must roll in the PIC, because you know very well that nurses who have their pension invested in that place, we have lost a lot of money, and that means lack of security beyond retirement for us as nurses as well as other public servants. So that's why we want what is happening in the PIC currently. It should continue, but we need more accountability. That should go even including the issue of the VBS. There must be attachment of taking those. You know, a lot of Mozangas and the likes, they were flaunting the choppers that they own, the bolts and everything. Those things must be attached and sold and taken back to where the money is coming from.
Indeed.
Yes, thank you, Reddy. I think we need to be very honest.
Put the mic on your mouth.
I think we need to be very, very honest to ourselves as South Africans. South Africa is a corruption scene. It's like a crime scene in any sense. So one thing that we are not trying to address here is the root cause of everything that is happening. The corruption in this country has been racialized, has been institutionalized, and people are not going there to try to challenge those things. Let's say, for instance, all the companies that are doing business in South Africa, all of them who are not from South Africa, they are also protected by the tax frame system. That says companies that are doing business in South Africa, they are not allowed to pay income tax. The taxable income is not taxed. They don't pay it here. They pay it from the country of their origin. And nobody's having the balls of steel to question those things. So whoa. Sorry, just. Now, the other thing that I think I need to raise is just to direct it to Polly. We need to be very honest. Sometimes we don't have to be like we are dealing with corruption in a witch hunt perspective. Because to my understanding with police that she only target black corruptors. Yeah. I've been following her on her tweet and everything. When it comes to standing off, she's nowhere to be found, and that is a problem to us.
Okay, I think.
Last thing.
Okay, quick.
Last thing, we are having a bank act that is saying the only commercial banks are allowed to do business with our municipality. Who owns the commercial banks are not black people. So all the black people who are trying to, who are aspiring to own banks, they are there in the periphery of owning the mutual banks. And for you to own mutual bank, it's a long process. If you don't have 240 million to license for commercial banks,
let's answer the things that you've raised. Mike, I want you to speak to the first part, and I think Polly, you want to address that. You only
I think you're also looking at the Twitter feed maybe selectively, as people are reading very selectively, because the Bain investigation, which is international, an international company and mostly run by white people actually, and Europeans. I've investigated that. I've wrote about that. I've written about it, and there were serious consequences after we wrote about the corruption in South Africa relating to Bain and SARS. The same with Regiments. Regiments is another company that we wrote about that did business with Eskom. So I know that it may look like we are only looking or focusing on the public sector, but it's absolutely not true.
Okay, Micah, on that first part about the tax system.
On the second part, you're dead wrong, but Poli's defended herself. On the first part, you're right. There is a massive international industry that helps the uber wealthy and multinational corporations avoid tax. We saw that insert earlier on. It's not necessarily illegal, but it's unambiguously immoral, because that money is money that should go to, well, sometimes it goes to politicians' pockets, but it should go to schools, hospitals, RDP homes, and so forth. There's a huge industry that is geared to helping these corporations and uber wealthy individuals evade tax, and they use complex systems and complex very creative accounting methods and schemes with names like double Dutch sandwiches, using tax havens in all sorts of different jurisdictions, and secrecy is a very important component of this, to go back to what Dale was saying. And the figures are staggering. There have been a whole lot of different studies that come out every year. We heard the figure of R1 trillion, which makes, I mean, obviously this affects developing countries the most, and it makes aid that Western donors provide to Africa look like a piss in the ocean.
Indeed.
So it's a case of the West taking with one hand, giving with one hand, but taking a whole lot more with.
My name is Martin from Nehao. What I want to ask is that maybe the members of parliament can answer this, including you, General. Why are we wasting millions to investigate thousands of rands? We've got commissions that are established, wasting taxpayers' money, investigating thousands of rands. When trillions and billions are in question, nobody's paying attention to those things. And also my second question is around media. Why is these issues of when few rands are lost, there's a lot of noise? When trillions are lost and billions, there's few. Look at the Steenhof issue. It only lasted 2 minutes, 56 seconds in media. But look at Nkandla, because that thing took a lot, 2 years. I almost thought the country is in Nkandla. That's my
Well, there's a simple answer to that. The one involved the state president. So there will be more attention to the state president. But just on Steenhof, I mean, Steenhof was a big issue. What has happened with it?
It was a bloody big issue, and it was reported on very extensively by Amabungane as well. We wrote thousands of words on Steenhof. My colleague Craig McEwen wrote a massive expose. Much of what we know about Steenhof would not be known publicly if it weren't for journalists. And we hear this all the time, that journalists don't report on the private sector, that they don't call white capitalists to account. It's just wrong. We hear it from people who clearly are not reading the news, because we are consistently.
Can I give an example of where we actually held people to account? And now IRBA found that Jacques Wessels, who was the auditor who took the Gupta's money out of the country, was audited through Linkway, and there was this whole tax scheme also sort of driving it from getting money off on their tax schemes too. So he was just kicked out, and it was based on stories that Mike and I worked on while we were working on the Gupta leaks. But again, there's no criminal repercussions, because this guy is not being investigated and questioned by the Hawks. It's another white guy that we hold to account, and he's out of his job because of the Gupta leaks team.
Why are you shifting in your chair?
I'm shifting because what Paul is saying is somewhat resonates to some of the things that I've been concerned about. The sense that there's a lot of talk. While you're talking, people are busy eating. And finishing.
Well, I have to talk, it's my job.
I know. But what I'm saying is the investigations tend to be a bit slow. The commissions are not moving as quickly as I would have thought. Remember, we wrote the original state capture report, and we gave them a very tight timeline in the sense that this thing must move quickly. So by the time these commissions are done, there will be nothing to seize, because people spend these.
And people would have shifted from their positions
and
no
I always,
accountability.
based on my own past experience with our own investigations, it's more effective to investigate an incumbent than someone who has left. Investigating a former deputy minister, a former president, tends to be sometimes, yes. But of course, the issue is make these things work. Take the assets and protect whistleblowers.
Wayne, very quickly, and then I'm coming to you.
Yeah, Ms. Nell, just want to say your department has excessive oversight responsibilities, and it's not carrying those out. Not just recently, you've got legislative changes. This is for many years now. What we need COGDIT to do is to hold those local governments to account, those municipal mayors, because if you don't do that, there's no money for bailouts there.
Okay.
They are collapsing rapidly. Civil society wants to work with you, and the doors continuously get shut.
I'll give you a chance to respond.
Engage with
You
us.
have the last word. But Chilezi, I want to come back to you.
All right.
Do you feel you've been answered? What do you want to say to the minister, to the public, to the people who are listening and can make a difference in your life?
All right. What can I say is this one. What we need is this. People who lost money, we know them. They know. Those who really take it, we know them. Please, we don't need we don't need them to be in jail. We need them, to be stripped.
You want your money back?
We really, we really need our money back.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Very quickly.
Society.
Okay, very quickly. Okay, all right, guys, we're closing. We've got 1 minute. 1 minute to go.
Responding to your question, as long as we appoint incompetent people to head police, intelligence, then you are not going to win this fight. We need to make sure that we professionalize the civil service, we professionalize the security cluster, then also that you give the accounting officers, not the ministers, take those powers away from those ministers who have usurped them wrongly, and let the police do their work. Otherwise, what you are seeing in state capture and PIC, if we had an effective, efficient intelligence and security forces, police, you wouldn't have that.
Last word from you, few seconds, very quickly.
The ANC has a manifesto that talks about growing South Africa together, and an indispensable part of growing our country is taking hands and fighting corruption, strengthening our institutions, resourcing them, appointing competent people, making sure that people are held to account and that there are consequences, and that poor people's money is recovered.
So South Africa is the second largest economy in Africa, the largest when it comes to GDP per capita. But unfortunately, much of our wealth is not used to improve our lives. Is there a way to stamp out corruption and theft of resources? Is there a will to do so? You decide. Don't forget the elections on the 8th of May. From me, Ridi Klabi, goodbye. I'm sorry anyone who didn't speak. I'm sorry.